Got a package here from Chicago Knife Works. I'm going to open this up with a Spyderco Watu. Another Spyderco here. It is the Canis. Spyderco Canis. Alright, so this is an unusual knife out of Spyderco's Taichung, Taiwan manufacturing facility. Spyderco makes knives in the United States, Japan, mainland China, Italy, and Taiwan. And their Taiwanese knives have a reputation for being very well done. Here we go. So we've got an unusual grind on this knife. It's, I guess technically we're going to call this a compound grind. It has a saber height hollow ground, right? Is that hollow? Maybe it's flat ground. It has a saber height grind, and then it has an additional grind that creates sort of a pass-through area through a middle section of the blade, so that for push cuts and stuff, you get a little bit more cutting efficiency going through that middle channel. So if you were cutting a box or something like that, you'd want to do it in this section of the blade because it's going to have less drag than if you did it down here or right at the tip. But it also means that the tip is a lot stronger, a lot thicker than typical on a Wharncliffe style blade. And this is a Warnie, and one of the things about Wharncliffe blades is that the tips can be very fragile. So you get something like this Kershaw leak, right? Oh, I got the safety lock on there. This is a very efficient cutter, right? But it has a very, very delicate tip. That tip, you see a lot of Kershaws with broken tips. This is a Wharncliffe design knife by Ken Onion, who did a lot of Wharncliffe style blades for Kershaw. I'm not sure if the Needs Work is a Ken Onion design or not from Kershaw. I mean, it has Speed Safe, which was Ken Onion's innovation, his version of an assisted opening blade. But this is a Wharncliffe as well, which is really similar to some of Spyderco's Wharncliffes, but it predates most of them. Very similar design to the Yojimbo, right? Look at those blades. Pretty similar. Pretty similar. But Spyderco has done a lot of Wharncliffe blades as well. So, and Kershaw's done a bunch. Spyderco's done a bunch. You know, the Yojimbo, here's another Yojimbo, which also comes in different sizes, the Yojimbo and the Micro Jimbo, which is hollow ground and intended to be sort of a tactical knife, the tactical Wharncliffe. The idea being that when you cut with this thing, the tip doesn't slip out of the cut, it just digs in when you slash. Pretty gruesome stuff. I don't know a lot about tactical knives. I mean, I have some in my collection, but I'm not a tactical guy. Spyderco has also done Wharncliffe versions of the Delica and the Andella and the Endura. This is an Endura. That gives you some size comparison. Endura's got a big, almost 4-inch blade. And there it is next to the Canis. Spyderco has also done some exclusives with the cutlery shop, where they've made Wharncliffe versions of the PM2, the Paramilitary 2. That's actually a very comparable blade in terms of blade length to the Canis, but the Canis has a different grind. Okay, let's look at them spine on. Okay, you can see where that cutout really makes a difference in how thick the spine is on this thing, on the Canis. Both of these are compression lock, right? Pretty comparable. And then the knife I used for unboxing today, the Watu, is also from Taichung, Taiwan. It's also kind of a modified Wharncliffe. It's got a little bit of a belly, just a tiny bit of belly at the tip, but it's basically a Wharncliffe shape. Kind of reminds me of the Tesla Cybertruck. Having some difficulty with my Spidey flick today. Yeah, that very sloping blade shape. This has got the same handle material as the Canis, which is a laminate of carbon fiber over G10. So it's not solid carbon fiber, just a thin layer of carbon fiber over G10 handle scales. And that opens with authority. It's on, I think, on ball bearings. Well, I don't know. I'm seeing something that looks like Foster bronze in there. A lot of these knives from the Taichung plant are on ball bearings, although Spyderco tends to use mostly washers on their American and Japanese knives. All right, let's do some quick size comparisons on the Canis. So I showed it next to a PM2 already, but that was an unusual PM2, so let's show you a standard PM2, or regular sized and shaped PM2 anyway. That's the S90 distributor exclusive version of the PM2, and a pair 3. That's the Maximet pair 3, but same size and shape as any other pair 3. So you can see the Canis is pretty comparable to the PM2. Let's throw a couple of Benchmades out here for size comparison. How about a Reptilian. Okay. And let's see here. I've got an Osborne, but that's not what I meant to compare it to. I meant to compare it to a Bug Out. There we go. So we've got a Bug Out and a Reptilian for size comparison. More comparable to the Reptilian. A little bit more reach than the Bug Out, and a little more handle real estate than the Bug Out. Pretty comparable to the Reptilian, both in terms of handle area and blade area, blade length overall. And let's do the Rat 1 and the Rat 2, huh? There's the Rat Model 1 and the Rat 2. So the Canis is a substantial knife. It is S30V. Yeah, there it is, CPM S30V. As a lot of these knives from the Taichung facility with the laminated handle materials are, most of them are S30V, with the exception is the Gail Bradley, which is M4 steel. S30V has been around for a while, and it's one of those things that people don't get excited about so much anymore. Let's zoom in a little bit here. Just because they probably already have some knives in their collection that are S30V, and it's not really an exotic steel by contemporary standards. You know, everybody's more excited about things that are more recently developed, even, you know, things that are in the same line as S30V, like S35VN, which is not necessarily a better steel. It's easier to machine, so it makes some sense for manufacturers, not necessarily for the end consumer. S30V is a very good steel. It's well-rounded. It was developed specifically for making small knife blades. It's stainless. It has good edge retention and good toughness, decent toughness. So I wouldn't turn my nose up at S30V. You know, a lot of Spydercos and Benchmades and other premium knives that still use S30V. I think S45VN is preferable in most circumstances. So if you're comparing the Canis with the current sort of plain Jane model PM2, you know, the PM2 would have the advantage in terms of blade material, but, and you know, you can't get the Cutlery Shop Wharncliffe PM2 anymore. Those are sold out. So you'd be comparing two different blade shapes, a Wharncliffe with a drop point. So if you want a Wharncliffe, I think you could do real well with this Canis. Let's zoom out a little bit so there's room for comparison. Let's just show it to you next to the other Wharncliffe that's most comparable in Spyderco's lineup, which is the Yojimbo. Okay, and you've got more reach with the Canis. Got a higher grind on the Yojimbo. It's going to be a little bit more efficient cutter for some things. Both of these have interesting sort of somewhat prescriptive handles in terms of, you know, the cutouts for your fingers really kind of dictate where your fingers need to go. There's not a lot of, I mean, you can do reverse grip, but there's not a lot of grip options in terms of how you're going to hold the knife in most situations. You're going to hold it in the same way, and the Canis has got a little bit more real estate. The Yojimbo is 4 fingers barely, just barely, and there's a tactical or martial reason for that, which is that they don't want any of this blade protruding out of your hand where somebody could grab it and try to disarm you. Not the blade, the handle. I believe that's the rationale. I've heard that before. Whereas you have a little bit sticking out on the Canis, but not much. This is more ergonomic, right? If you were going to use this knife, not for self-defense or tactical purposes, but just for as a cutting tool, and you're going to do, you know, an extended work session cutting with this thing, cutting a bunch of rope or boxes or something like that, the grip on the Canis would be more comfortable than the grip on the Yojimbo. Let's throw a Wharncliffe Delica up here too. There's the K390 Delica. That's a Wharncliffe blade. Okay. And I already showed you the Endura. Let's put that back for a second. So the Endura's got more reach than either of these things. And it's a lock back instead of compression lock. The handle material is not quite as classy, but it's going to give you good grip, good retention. It's a full flat grind. It's going to be the most efficient slicer of the bunch. And K390 steel, which is not stainless, but in terms of cutting performance, it's going to outperform either the Crewwear or the S30V of these two options. And I'll just put this back up here again for a second. There's the Paramilitary 2 with the Wharncliffe blade. Again, full flat grind, like the Endura. Yeah, you don't see a whole lot of, I mean, there are still some Spydercos with a saber grind. It used to be very common that you'd see the Japanese Spydercos with the saber grind or a full flat grind. They had both options, but it was pretty common to see them with the saber grind. But not so much anymore. Spyderco has really embraced the full flat grind for a majority of their knives. So it's interesting to see a saber height grind on a contemporary Spyderco. Okay. Well, I'm not going to do a full review of this knife anytime soon. I may eventually get around to putting it through some real-world testing and share a review with you, but I wanted to do a unboxing video on first impressions. It's cool. You know, it's different. I think that's one of the things that Spyderco has going for it, is that you know, Spyderco knives really vary quite a bit one from the next. You know, I mean, there are some consistencies in terms of the sort of design language. You sort of recognize something and say, okay, that's a Spyderco, even if you haven't seen it before. But one Spyderco can be quite different from another one, which makes it a fun brand to collect. So for somebody like me, Spyderco can get me in a lot of trouble because I want to have all of them. And the Canis is no exception to that. Interesting blade shape, interesting grind, interesting handle, very high quality production, good action. Okay. I would be interested in seeing some sprint run versions of this knife or exclusives with other blade steels and other handle materials, but with the same grind and the same blade shape. I think that this knife in M4 would be really cool. I think having full carbon fiber, you know, solid carbon fiber handle scales, or even G10 handle scales would be nice. Sculpted G10 could be really cool on this. It does have a nice sort of bit of material removed here, which makes a nice ergonomic spot for your index finger. And it does have some pretty decent jimping on the spine of the blade. Now we've got the designer's signature. Cool. All right, well, thanks for tuning in. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel and you like knives, what are you waiting for? I'm going to show you lots of knives. So go ahead and click that subscribe button. All right, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.